everybody. Welcome. My name is Joanna. I'm Chris's campaign manager. Thank you all so much for coming to our How to Vote Zoom town hall. We're super excited. I'm on this campaign because I care about voting and democracy and all kinds of other things. And I'm really glad that you care about that too. I think that's why you're here. So that's just really exciting. A couple things. This is the brief agenda. I'm going to stop talking in a second, and then Chris is going to tell you all about voting, and then we would love to hear questions from you. If you can put those questions in the chat, or if you want to chat them directly to me, that's the best way to get them. So we would really appreciate that. And then Chris will definitely answer your questions, and we would love to hear any of your thoughts or questions about voting. And yeah, if you can introduce yourself in the chat too, we just love to know like who you are and where you're from and why you're here. That would be really great. And yeah, if you can stay on mute for the duration, we would appreciate that, but there will be a chance to come off when we call you for your question. So that's pretty much the deal. Thank you for coming here. And Chris, you want to take it from here?
Great. Thank you, Joanna, and thank you all for being here tonight. We had actually more people register, but as we see happens on these Zoom meetings, the beautiful summer nights kind of beckon to folks and they end up in their gardens or other places. But we are recording this because we've had some requests to put this out. It may go out on community access television in a few places because people are interested in how to vote. I know most of you on this call, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Winters. I'm your current Deputy Secretary of State, and I'm running for Secretary of State. And the purpose of this tonight is to let you know how to vote. It's not about who to vote for, although I hope you'll vote for me. But even if you don't vote for me, I want to see you vote. Your vote is your voice, and voting is already happening. It's already underway. More than 30,000 Vermonters have already requested their ballots, and more than 3,000 voters have already voted in this election because we've made it so easy to vote in Vermont. The primary election is just less than 5 weeks away now. It's happening on August 9th. And so hopefully the information that you get here tonight will help you make your voting plan. That's what we talk about in the Secretary of State's office all the time. Make your voting plan, because who knows what's going to come up during election day. You might want to vote early, especially with primaries that happen in the summer months. People get busy, people forget, people have other things to do on election day. So make your voting plan now. Vermont is ranked as the #1 state in the nation for election performance by MIT, because we've made it really easy while maintaining our election integrity. We show other states what's possible here in Vermont. I'm the legislative lead across the street, as we like to say. Our office is across the street from the State House. So I've gone over there to shepherd a number of bills through the legislature through the years, pass many of these reforms that we've been lucky to have in Vermont. We really are lucky to have the access that we do in Vermont. We have what's known as automatic voter registration, so that when you get your driver's license or you update your driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote, or your information is updated with your town clerk. We have election day registration, so you can actually walk into a polling place on election day and register there and vote. We have 45 days of early, no excuse absentee voting. That's just not the norm in other states. They make it very difficult. They have very limited early voting. They require an excuse to vote early or to vote absentee. They require a notary just to vote absentee. We don't do that in Vermont. We also have ballot curing, which is something that passed recently, so that if you do make a mistake on your mailed-in ballot, you'll get a notice from your town clerk to come down and fix it. Say you forget to sign the certificate envelope. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And we're also lucky to have vote by mail for general elections, universal mail-out voting. So in November, you're going to automatically receive a ballot if you're an active registered voter. Now for August, for this primary, you have to request it. That's the same as it has always been. You don't automatically get a ballot in August. So if you want to vote by mail and you haven't requested a ballot yet, you'll want to do that soon. And I'll tell you how in just a minute. And the other thing that we have in Vermont that makes it really easy is online registration. You can register to vote online very simply. Joanna, I wonder if you could navigate us to the Secretary of State's main page, sos.vermont.gov.
Yeah, let's do that. Wait a second.
There's a page here on the Secretary of State's main website that'll give you just about everything that you need to know as a voter.
Okay, can you guys see my browser?
Yes.
Excellent.
So here you are. You're going to see those tabs across the top, and go to elections, please. And on the elections main page, go to voters. Now from this page, you should get all of the information that you need to make your voting plan. You can see that top box is polling places, that top button. You can find every polling place in the state of Vermont, not on the tab, but on the box as well. It's in 2 places. That'll give you a map of every single polling place in the state. If you scroll down just a little bit, here's some information on how to register to vote. So the first part of your voting plan is to make sure you're registered. If you're not, go get registered. You can do it online. You can print out a paper form and mail it into your town clerk. Or you can go down in person to your town clerk's office and get registered to vote there. Also here is how you can request your absentee ballot, either online, you can do it in writing, or again, call your town clerk. And if you scroll down just a little bit more, Joanna, you have information about my voter page. Most people don't actually know this, but every single voter in the state of Vermont has their very own voter page. You put in your date of birth, you put in your full name, you put in your driver's license number or your last 4 digits of your social security number, and a page will come up that's specifically tailored to you. It'll tell you whether you're registered to vote. It'll give you an opportunity to request an absentee ballot or tell you whether you've already requested an absentee ballot. It'll tell you where your polling place is, both for town meeting and annual elections, or for the primary or for the general. Sometimes that changes depending on your town. And it'll actually give you Google Maps directions to your polling place. And there's also a really cool feature in there. If you do request an absentee ballot and mail it back, it'll track your ballot. So it'll tell you whether it's been received. It'll tell you whether it's defective. And the last thing on this page that you should know about is the town clerk guide. So that's a full listing of every town clerk's contact information in the state of Vermont. So if you want to call your town clerk, there's the place to find it in one spot. So we can navigate out of this now. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about registering to vote. So first, find out if you're registered. If you're not, you can do it online. You can do it by mail. You can do it at your clerk's office. There are 3 major requirements to register to vote: that you're 18 years old, that you're a Vermont resident, and that you're a US citizen. And you can find that out if you are already registered by going to that mvp.vermont.gov, your My Voter page. And I talked a little bit earlier about automatic voter registration. Many Vermonters are registered and might not even know it because you have to opt out at the DMV. There is a section that says you're going to be automatically registered to vote unless you opt out. So that means Vermont has a really high rate of voter registration. So check out whether or not you're registered, confirm your registration, find your polling place and directions. Make sure your information is up to date. And then if you want to vote by mail, request your absentee ballot, and you should do that soon. It's like I said, it's 5 weeks until the August primary. So if you want to do that absentee voting, that vote by mail, request it online or call your town clerk right away so that you can get that in your hands and get it back in time. If you want to vote early, you can simply show up to your clerk's office at any time when they're open, their regular business hours, and you can vote in that polling place anytime leading up to the general election. No excuses needed to vote early or to vote by mail, and those ballots are available now. And I should mention the other cool feature on the My Voter page that's not up and running quite yet, but it will be soon, is viewing a sample ballot. So you can actually go to your voter page and see what your ballot is going to look like. So you can see who's going to be on your ballot, what choices you have there. And there's also, you'll see in November, not for the August primary, but in November, you'll be able to see 2 constitutional amendments that will actually be on the ballot, which is pretty exciting. So I want to talk a little bit about how this election is different from the general election. This is what's called a primary. It's a function for the major political parties. So there are 3 ballots involved in the primary. There's the Republican primary, the Progressive primary, and the Democratic primary. And you can only vote in one of those races. So you're going to get 3 ballots. You can only vote one of them. You know, I often hear from people, well, I want to vote for this Republican and this Democrat and this Progressive. Well, you can't do that in a primary. That'll spoil your ballot. Your vote won't count. Or people will say, well, can I vote the Republican ballot and write in a Democrat? You can do that, but that vote is going to count on the Republican primary and not be added to the Democratic primary totals. So you're kind of defeating the purpose there if you really want to support that Democrat by writing that Democrat in. So you do have to choose. It's a party function. A lot of people don't like it, but Vermont, this is Vermont's system, and we have what's called an open primary. So you can vote in any one of those 3 primaries. You don't have to register as a Democrat or a Republican or as a progressive. You don't have to identify yourself as a Republican, a Democrat, or a progressive. This just means you're pulling this ballot and you're voting on that ballot for this election. And you would vote as you normally do. You know, it might say vote for no more than 1, vote for no more than 2, and you can choose how you fill out your ballot at that point. What you do have to do is the ballot that you vote, the one ballot that you vote, you have to sign and seal that envelope. It's going to be called a voted ballot envelope. You'll get 2 inner envelopes inside the one outer envelope that gets mailed back to the clerk. So a lot of envelopes, a lot of mailings. That's why voting by mail in a primary is pretty expensive, a pretty expensive mailing. It's going to be a lot to put through the postage. So again, you vote one ballot, put it in the voted ballot envelope. That's the one you sign under pains and penalties of perjury, that you are who you say you are, that no one has influenced your vote. And then the other 2 unused ballots go in the unused ballot envelope. And then both of those get sealed in the envelope that's addressed back to your town clerk. So that's what a primary is. It's choosing one of those 3 ballots. And if you go into the polling place in person, you probably experienced this. They're going to ask you which ballot you want, and you have to choose one. So you can vote. So the next step in this is, after requesting your absentee ballot or voting early, there are other ways that you can vote. Like I said, you can vote by mail. And if you're going to do that, you're going to want to probably allow 7 days or so before the election, just to ensure that your ballot gets back. We've all seen delays in the post office lately. They're short-staffed like everyone else. They're trying to get more efficient. They do pay really close attention to that election mail. It's got a special stripe and a special mark on it. So they're pretty good about getting it back before election day. But just to be safe, if you want to be safe, we recommend that you get that ballot back in the mail 7 days before August 9th. So that would be August 2nd. The other thing that you can do, if you really want to be sure that it gets there, is use a drop box. Almost every town has a ballot drop box now. There have been grants available. We've been facilitating those purchases. In 2020, a bunch of towns put them in for a pandemic-related election. Just about every town has a drop box now, and you can just pop it in the drop box any time of day. You can also return that ballot to your clerk in person. So you could request a mailed ballot. You can head on down to your clerk's office and hand deliver it. And like I said before, you can vote in person early. So even if you request a mail ballot and you decide, I want to go down to the polling place and fill it out, take it with you before election day, take it with you on election day. This is all about having options and choice for how you vote. Vermont makes it easy. Vermont gives you lots of options with how you vote. So if you are going to vote on election day, we do recommend, and you've already requested a mailed ballot, we do recommend that you take that ballot to the polling place and vote that ballot. We believe that more voting and more people voting is a good thing, and that's why we've made it easy in Vermont. And again, I'll just remind you that ballot curing, if you do mail in your ballot and you make a mistake, you're going to be notified by postcard from your town clerk that you forgot to sign the envelope, or maybe you put your name on your ballot, which you're not supposed to do on the ballot itself. You'll get notified by postcard and you'll have an opportunity to go down to the clerk's office and fix that. Or if it happens within 5 days of the election, you might not get a postcard because that's not going to get to you in time. You might get a phone call or an email. They might try to find you in some other way. The clerk has to make a reasonable attempt to contact you. The other thing that you can do is watch that MVP page, your MVP page, to see if it's updated for having your ballot received or rejected as defective. So those are the ways that you can vote in Vermont. There's so many different ways. And last of all, you can just choose to show up on election day. A lot of people really like that experience. They like the tradition. They like getting down there and getting the sticker, which you won't get if you vote by mail. Some clerks put a sticker in with the mailed ballots, but not all of them. You can just show up on election day. And that's what I tend to do because I want to check in with my town clerk and see how things are going. But the point is, we want more people to vote. Not everyone can make it to the polls on election day. Not everyone feels welcome at a polling place. So we've made it easy. We've given people options. Just a few other things that I would cover is that for Vermonters who are 17 now, but are going to be 18 by the time of the general election, which is on November 8th, if they're going to turn 18 before November 8th, they can vote in this primary, which is a pretty cool constitutional amendment that went through a decade or so ago that allows them to vote in the primary if they're going to be 18 by the general. Vermont is one of 2 states that never takes away the right to vote from a convicted felon. Even Vermonters who are incarcerated can vote. So that's an interesting fact about Vermont, and allowing those people to continue to be part of society. If we want to integrate them back into society eventually, Vermont's made the decision that even felons can vote. You may hear some things about non-citizen voting. Montpelier and Winooski are the 2 cities that have non-citizen voting. That's for local elections only, so they can't vote on statewide races or presidential elections, but it's only for local elections, and they keep separate checklists and separate ballots for that. Another thing to mention is the accessible voting systems that we have at every polling place. These are for folks who may be visually impaired or motor impaired. And it's a device, a ballot marking device that allows them to vote independently and confidentially at the polling place. These are really, really amazing devices that we have that allow some Vermonters with disabilities to be able to vote just like everyone else. I'd mentioned that if someone is sick or homebound, they can request delivery of a ballot. So 2 justices of the peace will actually bring a ballot out to their home, allow them to mark that ballot there and deliver it back to the polling place. So that's another great option for people who are homebound. I'd also mentioned college students. We get a lot of questions about college students, and there's a Supreme Court case that says college students can vote where they're going to school or where they came from if they decide to call that their home and their residence. So they can vote in either one, but obviously not both. And speaking of voting more than once, there are penalties for voter fraud. There's up to a $10,000 fine and up to 15 years in prison. So when you sign that ballot to vote by mail, it's signed under the pains and penalties of perjury. So that's my overview of how you can vote in Vermont. It gives you lots of options. Hopefully that gave you lots of information, and I'm ready to take questions if anybody has questions.
Yeah, we had a couple. Thanks for that, Chris. We had a couple questions come in. Jeb, you want to come off mute and ask yours?
Yeah, so when I went and got my ballot and I brought it over to the town clerk and put it in the box, I was curious, what happens to it after that? I mean, I don't know, I have my name on it, but not the ballot. What is the process that Sherilyn and Moortown is going to go through?
Sure. Yeah. Sherilyn's a big fan of the campaign, and she also cuts my hair. I just have to mention that. Yeah, that's right. So there is a secure process for, only authorized people can unlock and empty those ballot drop boxes. And there is a provision in Vermont that allows for early processing of ballots. And we did that in 2020 so that we'd be prepared on election night to have all of the results. What it does is it allows the clerks to open those ballots, take out the envelopes, flatten the ballots, get them ready for processing, and even run them through the tabulators or put them in the ballot box if they're a hand count town. So it's processing and not counting. There's no ability to tally the machine will tell you how many ballots have gone through. It won't tell you the totals. And that has to be done at a time when it's been warned and there's been reasonable effort to have members from at least 2 political parties observing that process. That's not always possible. So sometimes it doesn't happen that way. It might happen just with a couple of justices of the peace or election workers, perhaps of the same party, but it's multiple people there. It's warned, it's done in a public place. And that allows them to process ahead of time. And then on election night, all those things that have already been processed and are ready to go can get counted quickly, and we can have our results on election night and not have to wait days or weeks or months, even like some states have to, because their legislatures have said, you can get all the mailed ballots that you want, but you can't touch them until the polls close on election night, which is really kind of silly because it delays the results and makes people wonder what's going on. So in Vermont, again, we've made it easy. We let that processing happen 30 days before the election, and then where all of our clerks are ready to go, and almost every single one of them has their totals to us at the Secretary of State's office by midnight on election night.
Some tidbits I did not know. It was pretty cool. Margaret, do you want to share your question?
I actually work at the polls in Middlebury, and I've processed those ballots, and I've made packets with all of those wonderful ballots to be mailed out. I wonder when online one will be able to see the sample ballots. You mentioned it's coming.
It is, and thank you for working as an election worker, Margaret. Election workers are getting a lot of grief across the country. Hopefully you haven't received much grief over there in Middlebury, but you're the true election heroes who make our democracy work. Without all of the people who volunteer at the polls, we wouldn't have the results that we get on election night. And also thank you to the town clerks who do just a wonderful job. And I've been over to see Ann in Middlebury, and she is a fabulous clerk, and we're sad to see that she's retiring.
In March, she'll live beyond the election in November.
That's right, she will indeed. So that sample ballots, I don't have an exact time for you as to when those are going to be available on the My Voter pages. Our vendor is working on that right now. We have to create all of the ballots and get them ready in time for that 45 days ahead of the election so that we can get them to the overseas and military voters, one of whom we have on the call here today, so that he and others who are serving in the military or living overseas can get their ballots back in time for the election. So that starts 45 days out is when we have the ballots prepared. And then, so we should have that functionality up on everyone's My Voter page very soon, but I'm sorry, I can't give you a specific date.
Awesome. And Jeannie, did you have a question?
Hi, thanks, Joanna. Hi, Chris. Chris, can you say more about the device for motor impaired folks, please? The reason I'm asking is I have, for the last few years, had to go with the early mail or absentee ballot because it takes me so very long to fill out a ballot in person. So I would love, one, is it available? Is this device available at every polling place? And 2, how does it work? When I have voted in person, one of the polling workers or our town clerk has filled a ballot in for me at my direction, obviously, but if it's something that I could do myself through a device, I would much prefer that because I love going to polling place on election day. And I've missed that. So I would love to hear more about it.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yes, great question. And this device is made, just for you. Every town has one of these. Now, the question is, have they set them up? They're supposed to set them up. So I think it would be good for you to contact your town clerk now and say, I would like to vote on the accessible voting system. The company is called Democracy Live. We contracted with them to have an accessible voting system in every polling place in the state of Vermont. It has a screen for the visually impaired to really enlarge the ballot. And it has a toggle system. I'm trying to describe it accurately here. I probably can't, but I can send you a video of what it does. A toggle system that allows you to move from toggle and button system that allows you to move from race to race, and it'll mark the device for you when you click the button. So it'll fill in the ovals for you. You can print it out at the end of that, check the work and make sure that you voted for exactly who you want to vote for. And then that ballot can go through the tabulator just like any other ballot. And the point is so that you can vote independently, that you can vote privately at the election, just like you love. So I would recommend you reach out to your town clerk right away and make sure they have that set up.
I will do that. Thank you, Chris. That is incredible. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we definitely have time for a few more questions if folks have them. I know a couple folks jumped in late, and that's okay. If you want to send a message through the chat that you have a question, please share that. I'll give folks a couple seconds. I'm sort of curious what people are thinking about. Like, has your voting plan changed this year versus like the previous pandemic years versus before that? And that I'm wondering if people have questions about their voting plan or thoughts they want to share along those lines.
I'll just mention that in 2020, we were faced with a really tough choice in March when we knew that COVID was rearing its ugly head. And we knew we were going to have a hotly contested November presidential election with huge turnout. And we were seeing what was happening in places like Wisconsin, where they were holding their primary. Vermont had just gotten its primary done before COVID really came to Vermont. And we're seeing like in places like Wisconsin, people didn't know, could I go to the polling places? Am I going to catch COVID, or am I going to give it to the poll workers? There wasn't enough PPE to go around, so they were dressing in garbage bags and homemade PPE. And people really had to make a choice at the primary in Wisconsin. Am I going to risk my health? Am I going to risk the health of some vulnerable family members in my home? Or am I going to vote? Because they didn't allow for expanded vote by mail in Wisconsin at that time. So we knew that was coming, and we knew that we had to get to vote by mail as soon as possible. We were able to do that for the November election. And by going to vote by mail, we had record turnout. We had more Vermonters vote in November of 2020 than ever before in Vermont history. And 75% of those Vermonters voted by mail. And that meant only 25% went to the polling places. That kept the numbers manageable, allowed us to space people out, allowed us to clean in between, allowed those town clerks to be able to, and poll workers to be able to manage 25% of the voters at the polls. So it was a huge number that voted by mail in 2020. So I'm really curious to see in 2022 whether that many people still want to vote by mail because they liked it so much, or do they want to get back to some sense of maybe normalcy that they feel, or that that tradition of going down to the polling place and seeing folks on election day. So I'm really curious to see what those numbers are this time around.
I'm really curious about that too. I'm curious, like people can like jump in the chat or pop off mute for a second if they want. I'm sort of curious, have folks changed your voting plan for this coming primary versus the last one?
I have. This is the first time ever that I asked for an early ballot, which I got today from the town of Cavendish,
All right.
which I will fill out and drop off tomorrow. I still think that there are too many people. I mean, you should just be on the news, Chris, and be everywhere on CAX and do this. There are so many people still who are not registered to vote and don't even understand what early voting is and primary. So I'm going to even save this envelope when I talk to others and say, this is what it is, you know, do it, damn it, and call your town clerk. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Get out there. Tell them to vote.
Clearly. I feel almost guilty, but I also feel, because I always go to the town office to vote.
Yeah.
But this makes it so much easier. It really does.
It does. It should be easier. There are other states that have done universal vote by mail for 30 years. Their states and their residents have come to love it.
Yeah.
That's their tradition, is voting by mail. They have really high participation rates. They have ballot drop boxes everywhere you drive through and drop them off. And that's the norm in other states. And it's a way, it's a trade-off of access versus, that tradition and that feeling of going down to the polling place on election day, which is also great. But vote by mail is safe, it's simple, it's secure, and it gets more people out to vote. So that's why we really pushed for it in 2020 and brought it to Vermont full-time in 2021. And in the next year, we're going to look at whether we can expand that to the primary and to local elections. And both of those are more complicated than the general election, but it's a discussion we need to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I voted by mail in the last election and it was really easy. It was terrific. And the nice thing was I could say, check, it's done. It's taken care of. I'm not going to forget. I'm not going to, be sick that day and not be able to go down or whatever. And it was just nice to know it was all taken care of and I didn't have to worry about it. So yeah, I certainly recommend it.
Excellent. Thanks, Vicki. Hi, Tess.
Hi, Chris. Well, I got my ballot and I didn't ask for it. So it must have been, I checked something somewhere that I'm getting it automatically. And I was really glad. And, the instructions for voting in a primary couldn't be easier. I think, and the way the ballots show up. So I'm really happy about that. I started voting early. Generally, I am one of my town's justices of peace or the Board of Civil Authority. So I work the polls. So I get that interaction with my community. But I always feel like, oh, what if something happened and I couldn't vote on the day of? So I like having the fact that I did it and I can still go, except this year I'm on the ballot, so I can't participate, but.
That's right. Yeah, that's one of the things that you can do is there's a box you can check.
Yeah.
It'll give you your ballot mailed to you for the entire election cycle. So
Yes,
for all,
mostly I did that, but I didn't know if anybody else had done that.
you do have to renew that the next year.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Couldn't be easier.
Nice. So we like to hear. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I think we can let these folks go on their way and enjoy their evenings. But I really want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I love this discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. And we'll follow up with an email just to let you know how to get in touch with us if you have any questions that you didn't think of tonight. And just thank you all so much for being here.
Awesome. Get out there and vote. Some of you already have. Have a good night.